So true. Foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Jesus here is talking about the 3 years of ministry. And before that, for 30 years, he lived a very humble existence, didn't he? When you consider all the prosperity gospel preachers and what they promise, how does this make you feel, Mark?
Yeah, I think they're preaching a very attractive lie, because they haven't reckoned with the realities of this world in its present state, haven't reckoned with the realities that God hasn't promised to lift us out of the awfulness of this world. And they haven't reckoned on the fact that the true riches that God speaks about, which they gravitate towards, the true riches are not actually necessarily physical prosperity, but actually the treasures that are laid up for us in heaven, where moth and rust do not corrupt, where thieves don't break through and steal. I think I was very struck. I've been struck myself personally in the years in traveling to different parts of the world, but struck years ago by listening to Derek Thomas after he came back from his first overseas trip to minister. He went to Pakistan. He came back really shell-shocked in many ways, saying he had never encountered such poverty anywhere in all his life. You know, the church that he was speaking for that week was located literally above an open sewer, so the stench that rose through the service was just abominable. But the extreme poverty that these Christians were living in was something he couldn't have imagined. But he said, what struck me was I've never met a happier group of Christians anywhere in my life. And that said that their joy emanated from something far greater than what they happen to possess. Yeah, I think it's true, especially in the Western world. We've allowed ourselves to become defined by what we own rather than what we are. And of course, the tragic thing about what we own is the novelty wears off very quickly. You go out and buy the latest gadget, and by next week it's ancient history.
True. Yeah, so true. And of course, those that sell the false prosperity gospel don't have a category for trials either, do they? What purposes do trials and hard times have in a believer's life to help wean us off from loving this world too much?
I've always been struck by First and Second Peter. That was one of those letters written to the church towards the end of the New Testament era, but in very distressing circumstances. So there had been growing levels of persecution, especially back in Judea and around Jerusalem. And professing Christians have been driven from their homes and their homeland, and basically Peter's writing to the new Christian diaspora. In Old Testament terms, there had been a Jewish diaspora through the Assyrian deportation and through the Babylonian exile, but now there was a Christian diaspora, and the people of God have been scattered, which had been a dreadful thing. They had to leave home and family. They had to leave their occupations. They had to leave their familiar surroundings. And it meant extreme fear and anxiety. And Peter and also James speak about not being surprised by the afflictions that you go through, because we've been forewarned about these. Jesus says, "Take up your cross and follow after me." Peter uses the example of a refiner's fire. So in order to get pure gold or silver out of the ore from which they are derived, the ore has to be put through the furnace. And Peter simply says, we as believers are being put through the furnace of affliction to burn off the dross of our impurity, and to wean us off our instinct to rely upon ourselves and our own wisdom, and instead to cast ourselves upon the Lord and trust Him for His promise. And it's often only as you go through those times that you never would choose for yourself that you actually discover there are are blessings in those sufferings that this world could never provide, but God provides in this unusual way.
Yeah.